coffin was white. Marco always said white was the color of things that hadn't been ruined yet. 43 people came. You didn't look at the coffin once. You looked at the 43 people who came, who sent flowers, who wore black, who checked their phone, who left before the priest finished. One man arrived late and stood at the back and didn't know anyone. He left a single white envelope on the condolence table. No name, no return address, just a photograph of a runway. You put it in your jacket pocket and shook hands for 2 hours. That night, you opened the envelope alone at your kitchen table. On the back of the photograph, coordinates and a date 6 weeks out. No instructions, no contact, just the assumption that you already knew what it meant. You did. For 5 months after Marco died, you flew commercial routes and said nothing to anyone. You filed on-time reports. You passed every medical. You ate the same meal every Tuesday because Marco used to make it. Nobody at the airline knew his name. Grief is intelligence when you know how to carry it quietly. But you were doing something else those 5 months. You were learning how product moves from the Sierra Madre to a city apartment in 4 steps. Growers, transporters, pilots, street-level distributors. The pilot was the hinge. Remove the pilot and the chain breaks. Not forever, but long enough for something else to happen. You researched 11 cartel aviation incidents in 3 months. Every one of them ended the same way. The pilot was replaced. The route continued. Disruption wasn't enough. You needed to be inside the disruption. The supply chain that killed Marco had a face at the controls. You were going to put your face there instead. Not to fly it, to end it. Your brother didn't die from an overdose. He died from a supply chain. Somebody grew it. Somebody moved it. Somebody flew it. You have the kind of face air traffic controllers forget the second you switch frequencies. That's not an insult. That's the only reason you're still alive. Your name is Daniel Reyes, 31, commercial pilot, 4,200 hours in the air. 600 of those in conditions that ground everyone else. Mountain turbulence, 0 visibility, crosswinds that bend runways. You didn't learn that in a simulator. You learned it flying freight through the Sierra Madre for $11 an hour. Never once late to a flight. Never once slept through a full night since Marco died. Marco was 24. He called you every Sunday without fail, not because he needed something, just because you were his brother, and that was enough of a reason. He made terrible coffee and remembered every birthday. He was the kind of person who made a room feel like it had more oxygen, the kind you don't realize is holding everything together until he's gone and nothing sits right anymore. The supply chain reached him on a Thursday. By Saturday, he was a case number. By the following year, you had a federal badge and a reason. The recruiter found you at an air show in El Paso. She put a photograph on the table, a single runway carved into the Sinaloa hills, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, no lights, no margin. She said, "This is where it comes from." She said, "We need someone who already has a reason to land there." You signed before she finished the sentence. They trained you to lie at altitude, to remember a face without looking directly at it, to keep a log that said one thing and remember everything else. Your cover: freelance charter pilot, gambling debt, morally flexible, the kind of pilot a cartel hires because he shows up on time and never asks questions about the cargo. The man who walked you in was named Valdez, aviation broker, completely corrupt. The CIA put you in the same room. He took your number before you finished your coffee. 2 weeks later, mountain strips, bad weather. No questions. He sent coordinates instead of details. The man at the airfield didn't introduce himself. He looked at your logbook, then your hands, then the way you stood near the aircraft without touching it. Pilots who respect machines stand differently. He could see the difference. He said, 1,100 meters. Unpaved. 7% gradient. Our last pilot put the nose gear through the surface. You said, "I've landed on worse." He walked away without another word. That was your interview. The Sinaloa Cartel didn't hire a pilot. They hired a storm. First flight. 4 passengers, 3 duffel bags. Nobody spoke. You landed clean, got paid cash. Tuesday, 6 sharp, every week. By month 4, you had a dedicated King Air. Tail number changed every other month. The cargo never did. The passengers were the intelligence. You read them the way you read weather. The ones who laughed on takeoff were lieutenants. The ones who never spoke were the ones who mattered. 6 months in, you flew a United States senator. Civilian clothes, private terminal in Arizona. He shook the cartel liaison's hand on landing like a man closing a real estate deal. You filed it under a mining company charter. He filed it under nothing. Because officially, it never happened. That night, you started the green notebook. Small, tucked inside the lining of your flight bag. Dates, tail numbers, faces, coordinates. Every entry was a flight Marco's supply chain never got to make again. Every name in that notebook was one less Thursday, waiting for someone else's brother. Month 8, 2 in the morning, same mountain strip. The crates they loaded moved, not product, people. Quiet in a way that had been forced into them. You filed it as agricultural equipment. Flores said, "Keep flying." Something shifted that night that never shifted back. His name was El Patron de Rutas, the route architect. You flew him 4 times before you understood what he actually did. First time, quiet man, window seat, read documents the entire flight. Second time, he asked about turbulence over the Sierra Madre. You talked for 6 minutes about mountain weather. He listened the way intelligent people listen, completely. Third time, he brought you coffee before boarding, set it on the cockpit console without a word. Fourth time, you started to like him. That was the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to you. The 5th time, he sat directly behind you. He said, "You are the best pilot we've had in 11 years. He said, "I don't say that." You said, "Thank you." Your hands didn't move. That night, Flores sent you his full file. You read it once. You didn't read it again. He designed the supply chains. All of them. The routes. The timing. The distribution network. The Thursday corridor that reached your brother's city every single week for 6 years. He was the reason Marco's Thursday existed. And you had just told him thank you. And meant it. Month 11 brought the order you didn't expect. Flores threw the dead drop, a name, a young mechanic who worked the flight line, 22 years old. Never flew. Never moved product. He fixed fuel systems and went home to his mother. The cartel suspected a leak. The name circulating internally was his. It wasn't him. You knew it wasn't him because the leak was you. Flores said, "Do not intervene." She said, "If he takes the suspicion, the hunt ends." She said, "The operation survives." You sat with that for a long time. You thought about Marco. You thought about what Marco would have said. You already knew what Marco would have said. You did nothing. The mechanic stopped showing up on Wednesday. By Thursday, his toolbox was gone. By Friday, nobody mentioned his name. You kept flying. That nothing weighs more than everything else combined. 41 flights in the notebook by month 12. 19 high-value passengers, 3 politicians, 2 law enforcement officials. One name that made Flores go silent for 11 seconds. She said, "Are you certain?" You said, "I flew him myself." 48 hours later, operation accelerated. Not because the intelligence was complete, because a rival agency was filing first. 3 years of your life compressed into 6 weeks. 2 bureaucracies fighting over a headline. You asked about the ground crew, the people who showed up because it was a job. Flores said, Your job is to open the door. What walks through it isn't your concern. You sat in that cockpit thinking about what the cartel and the CIA had in common. Both run on hierarchy. Both treat people as inventory. Both burn you when the operation ends. The only difference is the flag on the building. The night before the operation, you opened the notebook to the 42nd page. The one you never wrote. The one that ended on a Thursday in an apartment that smelled like old coffee. You wrote Marco's name at the top, just his name. Then you closed it and put it in your bag. Takeoff at 6:47. El Patron de Rutas boarded last. He set a coffee on the cockpit console before sitting down. Same as always. The nod of a man who trusted the hands. Cruising altitude. Clear skies. At 8:14, the encrypted radio activated. Flores, ground operation compromised. Stay on course. Then quieter. Daniel, land this plane. Behind you, his reflection in the darkened window. Not panic, calculation. The face of a man who always felt it first. He said, change course. Alternate strip. Now. The alternate strip meant disappearance. For him. For the network. For every name in the notebook. For the supply chain that reached Marco on a Thursday. For 6 years of Thursdays, you couldn't get back. You held the course. Minute 3. He stood. You heard the sound a man makes when he reaches for something. The cockpit door had a lock. You installed it 3 weeks earlier. Not a regulation requirement. A decision made before you knew you'd need it. Because the only person responsible for getting you out alive was already sitting in the cockpit. Intercept strip at 8:41. 3 federal vehicles. 2 helicopters at 2,000 feet. Everything Flores had promised. He hit the door twice. Once more. Then nothing. Same hands that flew 4,000 hours. Same hands that landed on that strip in a November storm. Same hands that did nothing on a Wednesday when a 22-year-old mechanic needed someone to speak. Same hands that wrote Marco's name on a blank page last night. Wheels down at 8:44. The door opened from outside. Federal agents. Fast. Exactly as planned. He passed within 2 feet of your seat in handcuffs. He looked at you once. The look of a man recalculating everything he knew about trust. You sat in the cockpit after they took him. The coffee he'd left on the console had gone cold. Engines cooling. Radio silent. The quiet that follows something final. The official report. Complete success. 6 intercepts. 11 arrests. Network dismantled. Senators gave speeches. Nobody mentioned the pilot. Nobody mentioned the mechanic. Flores said, you should be proud. You asked about Valdez. She said, that's not your concern. You already knew she'd say that. You asked anyway. From Marco, who deserved someone asking, even when the answer was always going to be the same. 3 weeks later, new operation, different country. Same need for someone with a forgettable face. You bought a new green notebook, page 1 blank. You wrote Marco's name at the top. Then you drove to the airport. The supply chain doesn't stop because one architect falls. Another Thursday is already being planned for someone else's brother. But not this one. Not these names. That has to be enough. It isn't. But it has to be.